Hey everyone, True here, and today it is time for a new Evertale Arena tier list based on over 100 top teams from around the world and my true power calculations. First, we will go through some of the new units, then go through the tier changes from bottom to the top, and at the very end, take a detailed look at how the very best units are ranking in the game right now. The first new unit that gets a tier is the new Storm Rolotia 2.0 or Giga Rolotia, and she is actually a really strong unit under the right circumstances. I would argue that if she was released just a few months earlier, she would have had a very high uptake, but recently the stun immunity has been on the rise, either on the sleep teams but also on the burn teams, of course. And so she isn't packing as much of a punch as she could have just a few months earlier. But that being said, she can still be very strong. She has that kind of timeline distortion going on. And of course, if she gets the turn, then she can release the Chrono Chaos, which can be quite lethal if you don't have stun immunities. In any case, right now she is going to the S tier. So this is not quite enough for one of the top tiers. I think one of the drawbacks of her is, of course, the very low speed, or rather the lowest speed that is actually possible with just one speed, even though she has these kind of temporary wards when she comes onto the battlefield. It's just really rough to actually get the turn. I've seen it way too often that she dies before that happens. Besides getting the turn, she also needs a lot of spirit to actually unleash the Chrono Chaos and subsequently the Giga Time Strike. And if you have a lot of spirit on your team, basically in an instant, she could pretty much wipe that out. Talking about spirit, moving on to the next new unit, which is Bright Snow White, this kind of first unit that has a transformation effect, and the Light Snow White version is actually kind of a support overdrive unit with a lot of potential spirit production. The dark version is more of a blood unit. Either way, that kind of light speed entry with the Hold Ground Plus effect is really nice. She can cycle through that back and forth for quite a while if she doesn't miss a beat. And I'll talk about her in a bit more detail later because she is going to one of the top tiers. That leaves us with 3 new units for which the data is currently insufficient to actually tier them reliably. We have Nobunaga and Honnoji, the new burn units, and then Water Alice as some kind of counter to burn teams potentially. Water Alice did get her AI fixed partially, so that means she could be a good contender for a good tier in subsequent editions. But let's see, all 3 of them in my reviews I said would probably end up in S or SS tier. So Nobunaga's and Honnoji's destiny depends a bit on the impact of Water Alice that has just been recently added. The battle between the burn and the sleep matter is in full effect still. Moving on to the tier changes, and first we look at the Graveyard tier, which has 4 new joiners. First up, Light Clarice, which is this kind of Survivor Mori unit. Really not all that great back from 2021. Even back then, she wasn't really a meta-defining unit, let's put it that way. Then 2 even older units, both of which of the water element and both have sleep effects. It is Water Alira and Water Rolotia. Interesting that they are actually declining even further now, even though the sleep matter is in effect. There's just so many better options now. So this is my explanation for that. For example, Water Alira, that kind of nightmare drain, was always really nice, but now there's just better options, and there are some sleep effects like the cursed sleep that aren't going away anyways, regardless of what kind of sleep attack it is. This should theoretically maybe benefit Water Rolotia, but Water Roloshia's skill set in general is just a bit underwhelming with that Vigor Impact as a mainstay active skill. And the last joiner is Storm Reset, a very subpar storm stun unit. Stun units in general right now not exactly on the rise, and her skill set was always kind of meh, especially considering she was released right around Dark Snow White, which had a much bigger impact on the meta. Looking up to the F tier, we actually see Orzakron rise from G to F tier, which is interesting. I mean, yes, he does have a nice stun entry, and he has a kind of a pseudo guard effect because of his high hate. But other than that, of course, this seems a bit like a fluke. I mean, yeah, still a nice entry unit, possibly abusable with that kind of reset skills from someone like Storm Michaela or Water Alice. But I wouldn't pay too much attention to this. Looking further up to the E tier, we see Dark Ossia drop from D tier down to E tier, and she's that kind of poison blood unit with the taunt skill, kind of that Halloween feeling. She's not even 1 year old, but already down here, partially because of that poison skill set, which is really underperforming right now. But even during the stealth meta, this was not really a great unit. Maybe she could potentially benefit again when the poison meta returns, but I wouldn't really put my money on it. Down as well, but to the D tier, is Earthray, and yeah, there's not much really to say. Her survivability is a bit limited. She doesn't really have good ways to heal herself. Yes, she can call that kind of Shikigami, which was always nice to kind of reset some of the entry effect units, but there are much better units available now, and she's also not helped by the earth element, which is right now a bit underperforming, with fire being much more prevalent than it was maybe 1 year ago. That being said, Earthray is still holding up pretty well considering her age, also over 2 years old. The same cannot be said for Apollo and Artemis, who were released this year, and this kind of burn stealth unit is dropping further. She's going, or they are going, from C to D tier as well. And yeah, what is there to say really? Yes, the burn meta is rising, but this is mainly affecting the very top burn units, and especially now with the release of Nobunaga and Honnoji, Apollo and Artemis doesn't really make the cut, especially with stealth being nerfed so much. There's really not that much to add for her. If you have her and run her in a burn team, that's still good, and she can probably do some decent stuff there, but it's not a unit that I would recommend you to pull right now, given that she is under B tier. Not quite D tier, but also suffering for similar reasons, is Fire Mirai. She's a much older burn unit, but after benefiting a bit of the Commander Astrid release, which made her a viable opener, now with the new burn units, this is pretty much over again. I don't think we will see much of her in the future. She lost a lot of power in the recent SSR world rankings, and thus is now in the C tier, which interestingly is also true for Momoka, this kind of water unit with the emergency guard. She is down a bit. I don't know, this could be a bit of a fluctuation. That being said, her usage level isn't that high to begin with. It is only 11%, and the C tier is where she lands right now. Due to that, still can be nice if you are facing a burn team, but other than that, not really all that great in other scenarios. Nobody new is actually joining the B tier. However, you do see some units leave the B tier, not only to the C tier as we have already seen, but also to the A tier. So we have 2 units that are rising here from the B tier, and one of them is the new Angel Dark Reset, the Dark Reset 2.0 with that Mega Poison skill set. It's nice to see her rise a bit, but still she is a bit limited. I would say she has 16% usage, is in the A tier now, which is showing some decent results, and I have seen her do a lot of good in some battles, but I also have seen her fail miserably. There is the big RNG factor with the instant mega poison that is completely randomly applied to the enemy team, so she could get very lucky and land a very good hit, or she could also just die without even triggering her revenge if she is taken out by an attack that ignores that kind of revenge skill. Still, I think you want to keep an eye on her, especially if another strong poison unit is released that could potentially lift up that kind of playstyle against the other metas that are currently dominating right now. If there is some good support for her, who knows where she could go. Similarly, we have another unit that is benefiting from exactly what I'm describing here, which is the sleep meta rising, and Light Colin is a benefactor. She is gaining some significant true power and also rising to the A tier. She has that kind of instant light speed entry, the sleep swap option with the Mori, and also that kind of nightmare assassin, which is just a very nice addition to eventual sleep teams right now. And the same is true for Water Jeanne, which interestingly is a unit that has been released for quite a while, but has seen an influx now as well, with that kind of sleep meta becoming more of a focus, or rather as well with the burn meta becoming more prevalent, because she can be a solid counter for that with the kind of sleep entry, with calling Water Michaela, who has these kind of double hitting nightmare skills, and just a really solid unit in the sleep style play. And she is now the second strongest Jeanne in the game. Also on the rise is Fire Elmina. She's going from A to S tier, and she has that kind of burn stun entry, really effective potentially against Sleeping Beauty teams, of course. That is someone that she easily can take out. She also has that kind of Ignition Rage heal, quite nice with the healing burn drive. Her hate is also something that can also benefit her when she has triggered that Burning Heart skill. She survives on 1 HP and her hate level drops. Still the most popular 5th unit in the arena lineups from what I've seen, though she is at a usage of 44%. And now we are coming to the top 10 units, and someone who is going up another tier is the Fire or Burn unit, the 100% guard Bright Astrid. With 72% usage, she now earned a place in the SS tier. And yes, she can be quite potent. With Astrid on the field, she is basically immediately burning and has that kind of burn armor reduction and stun immunity, as well as being a nice play against someone like Sleeping Beauty. Of course, you have to be conscious about her weakness against water units, some of the very strong ones, but also some of the newer ones like Water Alice. We will have to see how that goes for her in future editions, but for now, congratulations to Bright Astrid, over 1 year old and now rejoining the SS tier. Also going to the SS tier is the new unit Light Snow White or Bright Snow White as a number 10. Very solid uptake for being such a new unit, so that is why she makes the cutoff. I think one thing that helps her especially is, similar to someone like Cinderella, she can be used in a lot of different teams. She's not really all that specific in terms of who she needs to work with. She can basically be dropped into a lot of different kinds of teams, and that kind of universality, I don't know if that's a word, but that also helps her, and I think that is why we currently see her in the top 10. Let's see where it is going forward. Of course, she is still benefiting from some new unit boosts. At 37% usage, she is of course used much less than other units in these top tiers, but still very, very good stuff from Bright Snow White. Looking forward to seeing more from her. And the same is still true for the number 8 in the rankings. It is Commander Astrid, and it is kind of interesting. She had her second banner already, but she is only at 61% usage. Nevertheless, still number 8, because her impact is just so big for burn teams. It is interesting where she will go from here. Is the water sleep meta going above it, or do we see changes in the different regions? I mean, she is very big in Japan, for example. Other regions like the Americas are not adapting her quite as well, but I mean, we have talked about her a lot. I think her skill set is insanely great. The only thing holding her back really is that she kind of needs to be in a burn team, and ideally in a plat 1, which not everybody wants to go for or has the options to go for. But yeah, that permanent stun immunity, the burning heart, the burn armor, the heals from burning allies and also from getting turns. The instant guard incinerator is a nice touch, but also the kind of spirit production. If your burn team is running low on spirit, just use a burning spirit and it fills up the spirits again. Of course, burning blaze, an extremely strong skill, and the ignite all plus, which makes your team, your burn team much faster and also purifies them all the time. The only weakness, of course, being sleep. She also benefits from that kind of burning heart thing that I mentioned with Fire Elmina. Once she hits 1 HP and loses the burn status effect, her hate also declines and could mean that she can easily get another turn and heal up back again, or another burning ally gets the turn and she's already back healing up to 100% HP. I've seen it a lot of times that she's down to 1 HP and then just a few time units later basically back to 100% HP. One unit that is quite interesting to me that she's holding on that well despite everything that is throwing against her in the way in the last few months is the first unit that kind of defined this new era of meta units being released in quick succession. It is the Storm Lancelot, and her stun stealth skill set is being nerfed heavily in the last months, as I mentioned, but she is still holding on to 84% usage. Granted, this is mostly in the later platoons of the arena builds, but there she still seems to have her place. And I may need to add, I mean, yes, the kind of Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, and burn teams are really something she doesn't like at all. What she does like is the new water units coming out. Water units like Ludmilla and Clarice, as well as someone like Water Alice, I think do have a bit of an issue potentially with someone like Lancelot. Moving on from number 7 to number 6, we have a unit that also struggles sometimes when meeting Lancelot. It is Bright Ludmilla, the 100% Water Guard, with the elemental disadvantage against Lancelot and also no stun immunity to help her against the instant stun. But, of course, on the other hand, she is quite strong against burn teams, kind of putting a stop to a potential burn avalanche by purifying the whole team. Of course, there is a certain downside with her, and she is losing some power probably because of it, though her usage is still 98% in all the top teams. That is, with the Whale Breaker from Cinderella, putting armor on your entire team can actually be detrimental once Bright Ludmilla leaves the battlefield again, whether that is by dying or by stepping back or being reset to the reinforcements. That being said, 100% guard, as you see with the other 100% guards, they have just such a long durability in the SSR world rankings, or rather in these tier lists, because they just keep being important regardless which meta is currently prevalent. Moving on to number 5, and she is getting quite close to the top tier, to the SSS tier, but still doesn't quite make it, and that is quite interesting, but the reason is pretty obvious, I think. We have Sleeping Beauty here on number 5, and her skill set is just an absolute bombshell. Everything about her is just pretty crazy. The kind of cursed sleep mechanic, putting opponents repeatedly to sleep, doing the Dream Devourer, which deals an insane amount of damage, but also steals spirit from the enemy team. The Thorn Raid, which is kind of an OP skill as well, poisoning, dealing like 600% damage or something, also producing spirit. On top of that, we have the Ashen Garden, which heals your entire team, putting like thorns on them. She also has that kind of vengeance skill, always getting new thorns when someone on your team dies. She becomes a guard when she has a thorn herself, meaning she will redirect some attacks to her and hopefully sleeping some enemies. And she cannot be killed as long as there are still thorns on the battlefield. All that being said, why is she not here on the very top with that kind of skill set? That is, of course, because of her big weakness against burn teams. Basically, her entire skill set falls flat against them. Burn is completely ignoring her thorns and all her other skills pretty much, and she becomes extremely stunted if she is actually up against a burn team, because if she is burning herself, the only reasonable skill that she can use, if there's no thorn on the battlefield, she cannot cast the thorn, the Ashen Garden, and at the same time, basically the only thing she can do is the Cursed Sleep Strike, which basically then will just spread the burn to all the opponents, some of which might not be burning, but be like, oh yeah, thank you very much, I'll take that. And so this is such a huge nerf for her that she is still being kept in the SS tier. That being said, she is the number 1 currently in the Americas, where burn isn't as prevalent, and that basically tells you the whole story. Though I will add something more. Her usage is 87%, which is super high considering she only had her first banner. What that means is that she is pretty much everywhere in every team, but she isn't really that prevalent in the first platoons, but rather you put her a bit later and hope that you have already dealt with the kind of burn platoon ones that you may encounter in top level arena. And one way to counter these burn platoons was released relatively recently, and they are going to the SSS tier. It is Ludmilla and Clarice rising by 1 tier compared to last edition. And it is not super surprising, honestly. Yes, we still only have the first banner and she is at 78% usage, but the impact is already big. On the one hand, we have that kind of evasive stance, which means she can easily hide behind guards. Of course, not against some of these new attack all skills, but against most of them. She has some stun issues, so she could be stunned into oblivion. But other than that, with stun not being all that prevalent, her skill set is quite insane. Whenever she gets a kill, she becomes a deadly guard, which means she gets some damage reduction, becomes a 100% guard, and when she would be defeated as that kind of guard, she just heals back to 100% HP and is ready to live another day, gaining back that kind of evasive stance that she loses while being a guard. And besides the forced sleep and the elemental advantage against burn, she's also a super strong counter against potential hold ground plus units because of her Savage Knockout Strike. I'm not sure if that is the right skill name in my head right now, but this kind of skill that she unlocks after getting a kill and that can attack 2 enemies and put them to sleep if they fall under a 25% HP threshold. And that is really big because it can potentially have devastating effects on hold ground plus units, which cannot reset their hold ground plus on their turn, or at least gain back their HP. And it is also devastating, of course, for some of these Burning Heart units like Commander Astrid or Nobunaga, for example. And this is just the current reasoning why she is going to the very top tier, which is very exclusive in my tier list, as you know. Still on number 3, we have Light Anya with 97% usage. The best 100% guard in the game right now. She has that kind of stun absorb, but also more importantly, the Divine Guard Plus, which helps her heal for 3 times up to 75% HP. Unlocking Endure with every attack against her that doesn't put her to Endure. So that's great. And if she isn't stunned and doesn't get turns, her skill set is really nice for your team with that kind of instant give turn and other cool skills that can help your team. Hands down the best 100% guard in the game right now. The next unit also has a kind of 100% guard as a part of the skill set, at least temporarily, and that is Storm Jeanne, of course, the unit from the beginning of the year, still going strong at number 2 despite all the nerfs to stun units. She is kind of moving back a little. It becomes more rare to see her in the platoon once, but all in all, still a super strong unit with the kind of combination of Storm Michaela coming in as a 100% guard that is absolutely indestructible for around 100 time units, and she can even be mistakenly stunned and prolong that kind of guarding activity. And of course we have that endless cycle potentially going on with Storm Michaela reviving Storm Jeanne whenever she dies, and then just her coming back onto the field and the enemies just trying to keep taking out Storm Jeanne because of her high hate, but Storm Michaela just resetting that again and again. Also a nice effect on some of the entry units. And if Storm Michaela dies and another guard comes in and that guard dies before Storm Jeanne, then she will also come in onto the battlefield yet again. What might not be as prevalent are the features of Storm Jeanne itself right now, with that kind of survival stun that was super strong when she came out. The stunning is right now not on top of the priority list, which does a lot of impact, but it can stall some of the enemy units if not all of them are stun immune. And her Survivor's Judgment, which is really strong skill, but it is not all that often that she actually gets to use it because of her high hate. And last but not least, of course, there can be only one number 1 right now, and that is Cinderella, with the kind of skill set that has hold ground pluses that are resettable. We have endure effects that can constantly unlocked. We have that instant Survivor Storm that is absolutely deadly in combination with her Hypnoblast. On top of all that, the Veil Breaker, which is an really big nerf to stealth and armored units. And on top of all that, on top of being a great unit on her own, she can be used pretty much in any team. Plug and play, usually a safe bet to put her in the front, even with a burn team. Yes, she will not be able to cycle through the Survivor Storm and Hypnoblast as seamlessly. If she gets quickened, then the lock for Survivor Storm means she will need to do 2 Hypnoblasts potentially and then only 1 Survivor Storm. But even then, it is a quite nice hedge for burn teams. But even if you don't run her in Platoon 1, even in later platoons, it is just so easy to use her to great effect. Just so much going in her favor, honestly. I'm a bit out of words here, but just thinking about the Hypnoblast skill, which is an amazing skill with the kind of 50 time units, and actually producing 1 spirit, potentially putting the enemy to sleep with the kind of Veil Breaker passive, with the kind of Survivor Storm that works in conjunction with the Hypnoblast. It's just so good. And that is why she has actually reached a record 9.9 million true power in the recent SSR World Rankings. So there you have it, the new SSR Evertale Arena tier list. Over 10 hours go into this production. I have to collect the data from all over the world, consolidate them, and put everything together. So it would mean a lot to me if you could hit that subscribe button and like this video to become a true carrot. As always, I would recommend you to not pull for any units below the B tier. I think this is a valid threshold. Below that, only fellowships really are all that relevant, or some units that can be used temporarily. but once you reach 20 SSRs in your arena team, they will just not be relevant anymore. Thanks for your support, and as always, thanks for watching.